Okay, like I said at the end of the last video, we always want to close our sketch. And when it's closed, we get this shaded middle. We know it's not closed if this doesn't automatically fill in. The other thing that we want to do is we want to look down here, and right here where it says under defined, we want to make sure that our sketch is defined when possible. And there's a couple different statuses of a sketch, but you'll see that this line is black. The others are not, they're blue. And so what defined means is we're tying everything back to the origin with the geometric relations and the dimensions, and it's basically the way of SolidWorks kind of knowing where it is and keeping track. Alright, so let's take a quick look here at the statuses of a sketch. And so when we were just looking at the sketch now, we see it was underdefined, and by default that's going to be the blue lines. Fully defined is going to be in black, and basically what that means is now that the sketch has all the information that it needs to fully define that part, all the geometry that it needs. Overdefined means that there's duplications, and so SolidWorks doesn't like that either because it gets confused, like trying to double dimension something, or maybe giving it a length of a line but also tying it's the last line and everything else is tied to the origin, so by default that one would be 2, and it just doesn't need that. So we want to put as few dimensions and sketch relations as we need to, but just enough that we fully define the part. And then the last two statuses are no solution found and an invalid solution, and those mean that we have errors that we need to correct, and we will be looking at those situations in upcoming chapters. Alright, back to the sketch. So SolidWorks also automatically puts in sketch relations or constraints when it can, and here you'll see that it doesn't show any, and that's because I had hid them before. And so we can turn those on and off, and especially if a drawing gets really busy, we may turn them off just so we can kind of see what's going on. And how we do that, we can come up here to View, we come into Hide Show, and then down here to all the way down here to sketch relations, and I can turn these back on. And you'll see that I've got some that have been automatically put in. So I've got a horizontal here. This I've got they're coincident, which means that this line and this line are coincident, or they share that common point with the origin. Here I've got perpendicularity in the corners, so this line and this line, and this line and this line. And so we're going to now go further define it so this sketch is fully defined. So when a sketch is underdefined, we can drag it, we can kind of move it around. And so if I grab one of these corners and hold my left mouse key down, I can drag this here, I can stretch this. You can see what's not stretching, how it's not moving, are those lines that are fully defined in black. And so I could drag this out here, and what that has to do is with our design intent. Now, maybe that's closer to what I want, and then I can start dimensioning it. What we don't want is maybe to drag this around where we have intersecting lines, and you can see that it's no longer shaded. And so I can drag this out or to wherever I had it before, and if I don't like that, I can always hit my undo button, and it's going to go back to where it was, and there's where I was originally. Now, we said before with design intent that we're going to control that with either sketch relations or dimensions or a combination of both. And it all depends on what we want it to do. And so we want the part to change properly, how we want. Do I want to keep, say, this width and these lines parallel no matter what else happens? Or maybe these, because we have to consider that if we do change something and the dimensions change, something has to give. Not everything can stay the same if we're growing it or shrinking it or moving it. So so we have to consider that when we're making the part. So let's take a quick look at what the book is saying is the required design intent. And so they've got these different views here. And so they're saying horizontal and vertical lines, top and bottom, and on the side. We need an angle value here. We need a distance across these two lines. These two are right angles. And then we have an overall length. That means we don't need a length on these two angled lines, because with everything else, those are going to be variable based on how we've set everything else. So let's see what happens when we remove a relation. So let's remove this perpendicularity here. And so the way we do that, we're going to click on this angled line. We're going to hit our Control key on the keyboard, and then we're going to click on this angled line here. What that does is it brings up our property manager, and we can see we've selected entities line 4 and line 5, and here's our existing relation. So if I highlight that relation, and then, or constraint, whatever you want to call it, and then I delete that, you can see I removed it. And now if I take this and drag it, you can see that these two lines remain perpendicular, but now this one is no longer constrained by that perpendicularity relation. And so that is how we use these to control the drawing how we want it. Let's take a quick look at the different types of sketch relations and what they do for us. And so we've got coincident. So what does that mean? It's between a line and an endpoint. So here's before, and now we put this constraint on the two, and so it ties the endpoint of this to a shared location. So merge. This is between two endpoints of a line. So again, before, after. And again, this is all done with a constraint or a relation between these two lines that we can put on there physically by selecting those two lines. Here we can make two lines parallel, before, after. You can see the relations listed on there. Perpendicularity or perpendicular. Collinear, which means they're in the same plane, they're in the same line. Horizontal, we already talked about that. Horizontal between two or more endpoints. And so what that does is, you can see here it made these two lines horizontal. What it did here is these two lines are still at an angle, but now their endpoints are horizontal. They're in a horizontal line without being connected by a line. Same with vertical. That operates the same way that horizontal does. And then equal. If we make the two lines equal, we only have to dimension one, and then both will end up being the same length. And so, same with circles. We can make those two equal, and then just dimension one of them, and both of them will change by changing just that one dimension. Midpoint, before, after. So tangent means putting like one line in contact with one point on a circle or an arc. And then tangent between a line and an arc using a common point. And so that is going to make sure that those two are connected at that point. Basically kind of smooths that out, as you can see. Okay, so I'm going to end this video here, and I think we've got one more left to complete this lesson.